Welcome to that episode of Just More Fix. This is James. With me in this episode is Lacey.
Hey.
You can find us online at justmorefix.com or on Twitter at justmorefix. If you like us, you can support us on Patreon, and you can give us a rating and review at iTunes or wherever you find us at. In this episode, we're going to GameStorm space stations. And now, it's time to get our gaming fix.
I'm Willie D. Nelson from All Things Good and Nerdy, a pop culture podcast, part of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other tantalizingly geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Welcome to another episode of Just More Fix. We got a couple quick announcements today. I'm not sure when this one is going to release, but just sort of in the recording cycle, so we get these in depending on when it is. We're actually a little bit out ahead in our recording cycle of things. Normally we record on like Saturday or Sunday and then edit Monday and release on Wednesday, but we're actually ahead a few episodes here, so I'm not sure when this is going to release in terms of the cycle of things, but we are still moving ahead with our proto spiel for In Terre Haute at Games, so we need to pick a date for that and get that all scheduled and set up. So hoping to sort of build a small, budding game design community there to hopefully build maybe like a zine community or something, because that'd be really cool to do. So we'll be picking a date for that and getting that scheduled at Game in Terre Haute, and hope to see you all there. Along those lines with getting zines done and stuff, we are at the final stages of our Hastings party, so I have to get the isometric map inked and laid out, or not laid out, but put into the actual product itself, basically all laid out, and we're at the finishing stages of that. So that should be coming out to you guys very soon. I know we had a little bit of delay with that, but we had some just issues with sort of getting it put together and the final stages of that. And then we'll be moving on to our Three Sisters one, which I'm super excited to get that one rolling down the production line, I guess, however you want to say that. Last thing is, HillCon is coming up for us November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So probably heard us rave about HillCon and how much we enjoy doing it. And basically we just have all of our friends come to our house and stay here for a weekend. It's the best 3 days of gaming in Vermilion County, Indiana. And basically we just carve out time in our schedules to get our friends together, have some food, play some games, some drinks, and some good times. Because everyone has super busy lives right now. And I think sometimes we just don't take enough actual time to set aside to go play games with friends and just enjoy life a little bit. So if you can, and you need a reason and a date to coincide with us, we will be happy to give you a reason to take some time off from all of the mundane stresses that we have and do some gaming on November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and it should be a good time. All right, so today we are going to GameStorm a space station. And to give full credit for this, the inspiration for this came from the writing Reddit. So all credit for this one is to Ziau, that's Ziau on Reddit. And basically I'm just going to kind of read this brief little paragraph to give you guys kind of context, and we'll link this in the show notes as well. So this is no claim to be an expert guide, it's just a reference. World building can be exhilarating and exhausting all at the same time. Maybe these might help someone as well. If most of them seem predictable, I suppose it would be a good thing. Common sense questions about a world can sometimes be the most complicated kind of answer. So the title of this is, I asked my girlfriend with a master's degree in anthropology 20 questions about any fictional world. She asked me these 20 questions about my world, technically 19 and a half. Answering them helped me really broaden my view about the place I thought of myself to be the only expert on. And then there's a list of 20 questions that follow. So we're going to kind of GameStorm a space station and then apply these 20 questions to it. And the reason we chose to do something sci-fi is because there's like a gajillion goblin tribes out there that have already been done to death. So we thought we might do something that's a little bit different, and maybe you can incorporate this into one of your games. And who knows, this may turn into something larger, like a zine project or something later on down the road, depending on how cool we think it is. So to lay out some parameters for what we're going to start off with is that we're going to make a space station that exists out in space by itself and has existed for a while. And the world we're going to kind of put this in is in more of a realistic science fiction world. So a place in a world similar to like the Expanse or Alien. So there is space travel, but it's not like Star Trek or Star Wars, right? It's still like a relatively mundane world with feasible technologies.
Okay.
So do we want to name our space station first, or should we wait to do that until later?
Sure.
What are we going to name it?
Titus.
Titus.
They have to have a number, though. Space stations are like that.
Yeah,
right?
so
There's
like...
never just like one.
Do we want to go
Titus
superstitious? Titus Alpha?
Titus is better than Omega. You can't name something. This is the very last one.
Well, that could be really cool, though. Like, maybe it was like something that was on a production line, and this is the last one that they made. Do you know what I mean? So they called it the Titus Omega. Like, it was the last of the Titus series space stations that they ever made.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Is that cool or no?
Yeah, no, I like it.
Okay.
Titus Omega.
Titus Omega. Talk about superstition of things being bad. So that's one fact that we have right there is it's the last Titus model.
It still needs a number, though, right?
Right. Created.
Because, like, ships on the ocean is
Right.
like a similar sort of...
So I feel like if it's Titus Omega, it should just be the Titus Omega 1, right? Like, because whatever the Titus Alpha, Titus Beta series, whatever they were, right? They were going to have long strings of numbers. But if this is the last one, it's just like Titus Omega 1.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant like this was the last model of this.
No.
Like,
Like,
they were making
like,
it like this is literally the last spaceship.
Like the very last one that they rolled off the production line. Although that would be weird to have a line that like it's kind of big
it's
for
the
them.
only one. It doesn't need a number then.
Okay, so then just Titus Omega.
Yeah.
Like in our world, the last
you number
one.
it because there's more than one.
That's true. That's true. Right on. So this is quite literally the very last one that they've made in this series of space stations. Okay, so it's out in space. How far out is it? And I don't need like a number, but is it like way far out there? Is it like in the mid range of like how inconvenient it is to get there, or is it sort of like right in the
I
middle?
feel like everything is way far out there.
Right.
I want it to be closer to things.
So right in the middle.
It's a space station that's heavily trafficked.
Okay, so it's busy, heavy traffic. Is it like, since we're saying it's going to be busy and heavy traffic, is it like in the middle of everything, like it's a waypoint? You know what I'm saying? Like,
I don't know, like a waypoint, but maybe it's like the last outpost before you're really like way out.
okay,
You
okay,
know, so like if you're headed out there,
right.
you
this
have
is the
to
spot.
stop here.
Okay,
Yeah.
Right
And
on.
if you're coming back in, I feel like that could lead to some interesting things as well. Like this is your first stop on the way back in from
right.
whatever.
So I'm going to call this
from.
the first outpost. Then
Plus it's Omega, so
Yeah.
the last, it's the
Right.
last stop.
right. So in a like an oxymoronic fashion, we're going to call it the first outpost. So it's like you said, it's the first at the very edge. So you have to go through this. It's kind of like a funnel, right? Like a bottleneck. Okay. Does this
I don't think you can have a bottleneck in space.
true? Well, you know what I'm saying.
That
Yeah,
sounds ridiculous.
Yeah, true. Well, but in the concept of everything gets funneled through here, though, it does make a bottleneck regardless. Like if you've got to refuel here, if you've got to do whatever, do you know what I mean? Like in a way, it's not an actual bottleneck, but in terms of trade routes and pathways you fly, it kind of does. So is there any like mundane function of this place, or is it just like an outpost? Does it have
I
actual
don't even know
like?
if there's aliens. I don't know. It's sci-fi. You haven't talked about it yet. That should be like the number 2 thing on the list.
Okay.
Are there aliens? Yes or no? Like intelligent interacting
No
aliens?
intelligent interacting aliens, right? Or things that we would define as intelligent in terms of like human terms, right? So like porpoises and killer whales, they're crazy smart, scary, but like they don't have the ability to manipulate their environment like we do, right? So maybe like the xenomorphs are a possibility, but they're not intelligent in terms of like the way we would define intelligence, I guess. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So like creepy monsters and shit like that, but not
Beastly creatures.
yeah,
Gotcha.
yeah. So I'll put only people. And then that can be something that could be defined in the world. Maybe there's a first contact or something that happened. You know what I mean? But as of right now, as we build this, then no. So is this place, are we going to do something where it's like there's an industry here, like they mine asteroids here, or is this only a waste spot?
Here, no, I think it's only a waste spot.
Okay.
Like, it thrives because there is no competition.
Okay.
Like, this is the place
Right.
that you go. You have to. So it's like a trading post.
How about at one point it was like an asteroid mining thing, right? When this was the boundary, but now this isn't the boundary anymore, and they've exhausted the resources that were out here that they were like mining and doing things with, but they don't do that anymore.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If it's not a trading post or not an industrial place anymore, and now it's sort of shifted gears more towards like a waypoint, like there's lots of trade, goods dropped off, bought and sold. I'm imagining it's probably like an entertainment hub for people that are either on their way out or like coming back for some R&R kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm going to guess this is going to be kind of a seedy place.
Oh, see, I didn't. I want it to be like split. So like this is a big space station,
Right.
Right, but there's also a healthy tourist industry for people that like want to be on the edge.
Okay.
But you know, like the upper crust elite with like a sense of adventure. So I don't want to be like so far out in the black that no one can save me. But I want to say like I've been to the edge.
Been way out there.
You know, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. That's cool. I like that a lot. So I think
so you get this weird mix of like seediness and trade, but there's also like this on the other side of the curtain. There's like this upper echelon that's like
right. And then along with that seediness,
you know,
and then
I mean?
along with all the seediness, there's like, well, we can have that seediness and all that underworld kind of stuff, but that all happens below like deck C. Mm-hmm. You don't bring that above deck C, because if it's above there, then we really bring the law down on you, because you can't be messing up.
Right.
You know?
Well, but then also that, you know, creates an opportunity for more like high level crime too.
Right. Yeah.
Real like super like white collar crime.
So what are we going to call that? Like, all right, so I'm just going to say it's a seedy place, but it has like upper crust tourism. Plus it seems like a good place for like seedy characters to sort of like find a rube to like con out of a lot of money and those kind of things, you know, there's some potential there.
Kind of like, you know, kind of like a Vegas situation, right? Like anybody can go there and the amount going in and out is crazy, but only certain people are getting into the high roller room.
Right. I think Vegas is a really good analogy, because like there's the strip and then there's like the old Vegas part where it's, you know, a little more seedy. It's all towny. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that kind of stuff. Right on. I like that. So, but along with the Vegas thing, Vegas was never like an industrial hub. There should be this group of people that were like the old belter miners out here that were out here doing all the physical labor of mining and doing all this stuff that was dangerous manual labor. And now those people, that industry has moved on. So some of them left, but some of them never did. So maybe there's this, I don't know, organized group of people that have gone from, at one point was like a labor movement, but now has transitioned to organized crime. You know what I mean? In this kind of way, because the industry moved on. Right. And those that didn't had to change and evolve to survive or go somewhere else. And there's all these people that are never going to go, right? What other broad strokes do we want to do before we get into the weeds with this 20 questions list? Because I really haven't looked at it too much, to be honest. I looked at it a long time ago and thought it was interesting. So I thought we might just kind of like paint some broad strokes and then go to those questions.
So I think when you're talking about a space station, then we should talk about who owns the space station. Is it, you know, like one nation owns this whole place? Is it owned by a guy? Is it a corporation? Is it people literally own pieces of the space station individually?
Right.
Like, how is it broken up?
Oh, I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Like, who runs this place? Who's actually responsible for keeping it going?
Let me pitch a couple different views of this at you. Okay. In one view, we have like a central government that owns the space station, whether that's like a corporation or whatever, but whatever it is, whether it's a corporation or a government, they're responsible for the physicality of the space station, right? In terms of like safety and airlocks and that kind of stuff. Or on the other end of it, which could even be a bigger disaster, is that when you buy part of the space station, like this wing, this deck, right? Well, you're responsible for all of that part. So then if I'm out further, if my section of stuff that I own is out further than yours and you're not doing your maintenance on things, it creates this weird thing where maybe the closer to the hub, the central hub of the space station are, the more valuable the property is. Because like on the outs, as the further out you get, it's a little less maintained, a little more risky. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you're always going to have a better view on the outside, so I don't know that I agree with
Well, I think the upper echelon, like the top crust part, that's obviously completely well maintained, and there's no...
See, I see it more like the Titanic, right? Like the higher up and the farther out you go, the more costly the rooms are on the cruise ship, right? And, you know...
Yeah, but like... In terms of a space station, though, it's like built round with all these little pods on it, so you don't have to think in terms of... Like, there's nothing just below deck with no windows to stay afloat, because that doesn't matter out here.
Right, but, you know, like inside or whatever.
Right.
Less.
The only thing
more isolated is on the edges.
The only thing I'm thinking, though, is, like, if you look at your arm, right, and this is the part that's close to the central hub.
Well, I guess, like, what does the space station look like? That's probably an important factor in what we're talking about right now.
True.
Because...
So I was envisioning, and we can go any direction, but I was envisioning, like, a central, like, column with spokes and then a big ring, like rings around. Do you know what I mean? You know, like concentric rings.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Does that work?
Yeah. That's not at all I was picturing, so.
Well, because like usually those things like to generate gravity, I just learned this by watching The Expanse. They have like some kind of a spin to them, so it creates an artificial gravity to them or whatever, you know.
Okay.
So like a central spire, the further out you are, the more, you know, risky it is or whatever.
But
and
they're
then
all out.
well, I mean, like if you're on the first ring, it's there's less to depend on because you're closer to the central spire. But if you're on the third or fourth tier out, then if something goes wrong on the second tier, then there's going to be problems for you, right? Mm-hmm. That's all I was thinking. And there doesn't have to be any kind of logic to it because sometimes there's no logic to real estate either. So maybe that's true to a degree, but the very furthest out ring, that's the primo because that's where you can see out and whatever. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the very top and the very bottom of the spire or whatever it is. Okay, very cool. I like that. The very outside rings are primo, and then it kind of goes in from there in terms of cost. But those are like the actual, like what you would call like a townie, like the people that actually live here and are native here. Mm-hmm. Right on. Do you think before we jump into the questions?
So are they like leased? Is that how it works? It's like this. It's owned by a corporation and then leased.
Oh yeah, we didn't really talk about that. So I don't know. Do you think?
I think that makes the most sense because you know, sort of win as a team, lose as a team in this kind of situation.
True that. Well, yeah, and then it would make sense if initially it was put out here as a mining outpost. That would probably be owned by a corporation. Mm-hmm. And then since then, that corporation has like sold it off to whoever. And now it's this weird kind of conglomeration of things and whatever. They're still making money. So whatever. Right? Very good. What else? Anything else? Or would you jump right in?
I don't know if it's like built into what we usually talk about, like if they're like what kind of resource and scarcity.
Oh, yeah. So let's give it 2 surpluses and then 2 scarcities. Or should we do 3? Let's do 3. 3 is a good number. So surpluses,
trade,
and scarcity. So trade is a surplus. Mm-hmm. So for scarcity, I'm going to put affordable things. So because the trade outpost, you can get anything you want, but it's going to be expensive here. Mm-hmm. Or does that make sense or no?
I don't know. I mean, there's always going to be things that are more common and less common. Like,
well, yeah, but
like I see what you're saying. Like if you don't produce anything, then. Mm-hmm. And it is farther out, so everything comes through here eventually. Mm-hmm. But, you know, it's not necessarily close to lots of things.
Well, so I'm thinking like in terms of like everybody talks about Hawaii or Alaska. Things are always crazy expensive there because it all has to come out there by boat.
Right.
And it's...
Right. Things aren't naturally going to Hawaii, though. It's not like a port on the way to anything. It's more like a trade on demand kind of.
Well, and then I think this also creates a very strong black market.
This has more of like a more of a harbor feel and less of an island feel.
Okay, yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of both because it's a space station, but I see the analogy you're making now.
Right.
So this expensive goods also creates a strong black market because that's just how that's going to naturally work. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So what other surpluses and scarcities do we have then?
I think you have a surplus of manual labor. Mm-hmm. Like you mentioned, there's lots of, there's lots of unemployed former miners. So you can get laborers
right on
for whatever,
Yeah. Cheap labor.
Scarcity, military intervention or whatever the policing of the location.
Right. So like formal federalized oversight.
Right.
That's
for
a
good
great
and for ill. But, I mean, should there be a disaster, help is on the way in 3 to 6 months.
Yeah. Well, and then that also comes with like a certain amount of corruption. So maybe there are like federal liaisons here, but they're just sort of, they don't get involved unless it's like really serious, and they don't, or maybe they don't have a lot of power, like institutional power to be able to do things. Right on. So a last surplus then maybe, how about since we talked about this is like a pleasure hub stop area, right? There's just lots of things that are here to sort of make you feel good. So whether that's like that sex, drugs, rock and roll atmosphere, right? So whether that's any way you choose to find entertainment or whatever it is.
Escapism.
Yes.
There's a surplus of escapism here in all its lovely forms.
Well, and I like that too, because then there's this sort of like thin veneer of civilization across the top of everything, but
like Vegas.
Yeah, but underneath all of that, it's really pretty dark. Like scary bad. As long as the party's going, though, it's all good. All right, so one more scarcity. God, this is great. I want to play this game already. So let's try and make a scarcity that doesn't exactly fit in with what we've got going so far. Do you know what I mean? Something just a little bit like askew. So we have lots of fun, lots of escapism, lots of...
How about fuel?
Right on.
I mean, people come here for it. And like I said, it's the last place on the way out. So there's just never enough.
Mm-hmm. Right on. And that can play...
Especially, like, maybe there's a shortage for, like, the local people that can't afford to pay.
Well, and that sort of ties into that black market thing and, like, oh, I've got to fuel up the top-of-the-line cruiser that just came in here because that's just not going to work out in the future for me if I short them. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that works well. Right on. All right, so there are 3 surpluses and 3 scarcities. So anything else before we move into the list, do you think? Because with this, I thought one of the things I kind of thought we might try and avoid is doing like specific NPCs. Like we're going to look at this like at a larger overview. So maybe
like specific NPCs, but like organizations, maybe 2 or 3 factions that exist. At least.
Right. So we've got one that I made, which is this sort of criminal enterprise that is sort of like a racketeering, straight up corruption mob kind of thing that came out of the lack of work initially, right? So there's that one. What else?
The upper echelon elitist corporate. I mean, there's probably some kind of a corporate shark type. Think of your Babylon Berlin guy running the swanky restaurant. Like there's one of those guys,
right?
And his cronies that are keeping all of the riffraff outside of their upper and lower outer rings.
Mm-hmm. Right on.
At the same time, working with those people to get the things that need to be obtained.
I'm just going to call this one the mob then. So we'll have the mob and the high rollers. And maybe there's some interaction in between the two of them, when it suits them or whatever. Because, the money's always green.
The aristocrats.
Yeah. Like if they pay, they get what, it's what, if you can pay the price. That's how that works. So and then we need a third one just because 3s,
So I think like this is supposed to be some kind of advanced world. There's not a lot of law out there. So I don't want to call it like a homeowners association, but there's some kind of group, right, that's responsible for making sure that, you have,
like
to maintain some semblance of balance. Right. No, not even like a security. Like those are the people enforcing things. Like there's a group meeting from the different neighborhood factions or whatever that they get together like in a boardroom to discuss how we keep this satellite going and just like a homeowners association.
I'm writing HOA.
Like a neighborhood meeting.
Oh God. So painful.
What do they call those? Not like a mayor, an alderman meeting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So each section of the satellite has an alderman.
Now we're talking Chicago stuff. I like it. You want to talk about corruption? Right on. All right.
Yeah, some just like actual honest to God politics.
Right. Yeah. Very good.
Because this is basically a giant town.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. All right. I think we're good there. Should we jump into these 20 questions then?
Yeah.
All right. So the first one: what does the sky look like? So obviously it's space. Right. Mm-hmm. But I think we can interpret that a little bit. So are there any sort of like, we mentioned there was mining here formerly. So I think there's a bunch of shelled out asteroids. Right. So smuggling, hiding things, it sort of suits that. So there's shelled asteroids. Are there any other important features that are sort of like in the, the space sky, I guess you might say? Like nebulas or gas clouds or weird things like that?
I think when you like turn back in, you're facing like this more of a solar system area, so you can see the other planets like in the distance.
Right. And that's cool because it makes like a constant reminder of home as the space station rotates and you see the solar system come into view, right? Mm-hmm. And then it continues to turn and then it's gone again. I like that. That's kind of
and then you get a
bittersweet.
cool sort of juxtaposition because then when you face the other side, there's just like
the dark,
distant
the blackness,
stars and that. Although I kind of picture like a viewing area on the elite circles, so it's like the entire, I guess, window of that. There's like a room that's just a giant window that's like a lens, so that when you face the planets, instead of like seeming like more far off, it's like a big planet in view, and like it magnifies
like
things like a telescopic window.
Right on. All right, so number 2, What is the architecture like? We already kind of described a little bit with this central spire with a series of concentric rings going out on it, right? But I also think it's important to specify that the overall physical structure of the space station, if you look at it from the outside, is old. Because this has been out here for a long time. Because they've hollowed out all these asteroids, right? So I'm going to say the station itself is aged and old. But what about on the inside? Are we looking for like a smooth, sterile white kind of 2001 look, or is it?
Oh no, I don't think so at all. I think on the I picture, you know how when you go to a city, right? Like there's like New York, right? And you have like this is the Italian section of town, and like this is Chinatown, like that. But even more so because then you're talking like people from a whole planet are in this section, and people from a whole planet are in this section. So you just picture like this interesting mixture of like languages and food and decoration, and so like each ring that you go to has a drastically different feel. It's like opening up a door onto another planet.
I think it would be cool if we had what you're saying, but like in the sections where it's in the areas where it's very, very poor, right, and a lot of poverty or whatever, these more seedy areas. I think that it's like, are you talking like it's just all of these cultures have been put into a blender and then spun around, and it's sort of here is this, and like, you know, right next door to that, like that is what you're talking about?
Well, kind of, but I think like just like in any other neighborhood, so like the miners are here first, right? And when they send them out, people naturally gravitate towards familiarity.
Oh, right.
So they set up in like cultural units. So you'd be like, okay, well, everybody, you know, let's, you know, this is the globe we currently occupy. Like, okay, this is the Earth section. So over here, you know, in apartment buildings 100 to 300, these people are Chinese. These people are from the Congo. These people are from America. Over here, you have the Canadians, and then it you know, and it's decorated with, you know, what reminds them of their homeland,
right?
You know, pictures and colors of paint or dye or whatever they've done. You know, maybe there's even like, you know, vendor booths or whatever set up in the hallways. It's like it's busy and you can get this kind of food at these different places. And
so here's a thought, and this is just my pitches at you. I think it's a cool idea for the areas that are just below where the really ritzy areas are, so that the people that are there are like, oh, we're going to go slum it. And they want to have these very specific experiences. So those areas are maintained sort of to be that way. But once you get lower down into the space station where the people actually live, I feel like those divisions become more about like what you do.
So what you see is like this ultra clean sort of like aristocratic area, and then you go down into what would be like a mock version. So this is like Epcot Disney World.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly.
And then there's actual people like living underneath that.
And then below that,
in like a regular neighborhood kind of situation.
Well, so it's just like you said. So this extremely wealthy group, they want to go have this experience out there, and we're on the edge. And then,
I like that.
Then like the tourists can be, the tour guides can say,
we're like Vegas again, right? Like you have your main strip, and then a couple blocks over you have like actual Vegas.
Right, yeah. Well, then like they can sell you this experience, like we're going to go down into the space station.
Right.
And so as you go, the Epcot thing is very relevant. And this is whatever it is, the mining, this is the miners area. And look here, this is where they get their drinks. And, you know, like almost.
This is peak authentic Earth.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, yeah.
And then below that, like, so that is maintained by those tourist organizations, sort of artificially, you know, run down, but not actually run down. You know, it's like we painted rust on the wall here.
Right.
It's not actually rusty. And then below that, then it's just sort of dog eat dog. We stay wherever we can. And it's like a true, like, melting pot of everything together. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just picture like the upper crust people coming down, just like Brad Pitt in that Mexicans movie. Like, do you have a car that's a little more Mexican?
Yeah, we have an El Camino. Yeah, it's
like,
great.
Yeah, that.
Yeah,
that right there. Where you're like, oh my god.
You're right.
What a schmuck.
Well, I just think it's funny to think that if you're selling an experience to people, that they can have this moment where they go down there and, oh, look at what you, like in this kind of trippy Westworld kind of a way.
Mm-hmm.
Right on. Okay, very good.
Well, I have people like, I've never eaten spaghetti, not even once.
So, and then we didn't mention
I don't even like marinara.
the upper, the very, very ritzy area. I just feel like it's just polished and posh.
Yeah. Yeah, much cleaner, much less cluttered. Because really, I would picture in a place where space, amount of physical space is the most commodity, because it's not like there's another building you could go to or, another space station you could erect with a snap of your fingers, that to have a large amount of unoccupied space is a show of wealth.
Yes. Oh, that's so good. So I'm just going to write open in quotes on that. That's really good. Because you're right. The true commodity here is once you get outside of your basic needs, it's just extra room. So everything is cramped in these. I think we have in this artificial zone, right? It's cramped in a way that would make people that aren't experienced and used to that feel cramped. But but to everyone else that lives on the station, it's not. Right. It's like, wow, there's a lot of room here to move around. We're not shoulder to shoulder, stacking people in or whatever. And then in the area where everyone actually lives, this more complicated sort of like mixture of everything together, you are just right on top of one another. All right. So next question is, how do the people get around? So complex elevator, segways. Well, yeah. So I'm envisioning like elevators, like big elevators, like public transportation style, like subway style, right? For most of the lower decks. And then the upper decks, there are probably like pods or something that they get into that transport them around, like in a larger Segway kind of a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel like it's the most human thing, where you would have some kind of like motorized vehicle to move you around, but then like on the inside of so many of the rings, there's like a moving sidewalk that's basically like a giant treadmill so that you can walk on this part. But when you actually want to get to where you're going, you ride something.
Right. Yeah, I like that. I got treadmill dog down.
Such a human thing.
What types of food do they eat here?
Well, I mean, I think there's a huge variety. Like, I mean, that's kind of what we talked about, right?
But, so do they have actual meat here? Or is it some kind of synthetic thing that they sort of grow in a lab?
I don't think anybody can sustain actual meat in a space sci-fi setting. Right. Like, it's just not feasible. There are no space chickens.
Something right, just like synthetic food.
Yeah, synthetic. I mean, there's a potential you could grow plants.
Right.
I mean, there could be like a greenhouse section, hydroponics and artificial sunlight. That's doable. Right. But like actual livestock, the amount of effort, like energy and everything that would take is, I don't think, reasonable.
What sort of fashion would one encounter? So I feel like this one is kind of cheating a little bit for the posh people, because they're coming from all over the galaxy or whatever, and they're going to bring whatever sense of fashion they have from their home places. So I feel like the servants up there have this general sort of nice suits, butler style of attire, but that's just for the what you would call the staff or whatever that's up there. Down below, though, I think.
But I want to expand on it, because we already talked about the idea of space. So I like the idea of the outfits of the upper echelon also taking up a lot of space. So picture like when you used to have the big hair and the big poofy sleeves and the bustles or the hoop skirts. Like, you are occupying the maximum amount of real estate with your outfit.
And then I keep saying feeling.
And like large amounts of fabric too, like with the idea of the zoot suit, right? So everything is a commodity here. So now you just have extra ruffles and layers that are existing for no reason whatsoever.
Well, then that would be true of like
that you were able to accumulate these things.
The very high end shops you would go look for. They're going to be selling things that take up a lot of space and extra fabric and whatever. So then everyone else below is just 100% functional
and also like reused, repurposed. So things are like well worn, maybe patched a little bit or, extra fasteners or zippers to close up things that should never have been opened in the first place.
All right. Number 6. Are there holidays? This is my favorite question. So I feel like there should be a founding day, or the day the station got started.
Okay, wait, hold on. Go back to the close.
Okay.
Because I think it's important. I don't want our regular people to be boring, because like, people will never be just boring, right? So it's functional, it's hand-me-down. But so my follow-up question is, like, what do they do to make their clothing unique from one another? Because there's always something, you know, or maybe it's not the clothing. Maybe it's something I'm doing with makeup, or
I think it's makeup and
hair,
tattoos and hair.
Okay.
Those are things that are permanent or pseudo-permanent, right? I'm assuming it would be feasible to have, like...
I think in this day and age, you can change them out.
Yeah, like wand on a tattoo and then wand
like
it
laser
off, right?
tattoo removal.
So, but I think fashion, that would tie into fashion, though. So I think it makes sense to me that it would be tattoos and hair and that kind of stuff. Because if the tattoos go on with something like laser technology and come off that way, that's not a thing that you have to have brought here, which would be expensive. That's just, we have this device and then I do it. And the same could be true with your hair and whatever else, right?
I like that.
Maybe not. Well, I'm going to say makeup probably falls into the same category as tattoos, because whether you want to have like some series of tribal bands or whatever put on versus red eyeshadow, whatever it is, it's sort of like functionally it's the exact same thing with this machine.
Well, they make tattoo makeup now. I feel like that would be the thing. Like, that's just another form of tattooing. Right.
That's what I'm saying. Like, functionally with this device, it would be the exact same thing. So, very good. All right. So, number 6 is, are there holidays? So I'm going to say that there's a founding day, and that's when the space station first came on, like it, you know, booted up and came on. And I think that should be a big deal, and maybe that it's a blackout day for all of the resorts and whatever else. So it completely shuts down, and that's like the one day a year that the corporation keeps everyone happy here. So there's like a big celebration, no one works, feasts and parties and whatever. And the corporation just foots that bill because they're making money hand over fist here.
Is there any kind of, like rebellion or anything that gets celebrated? Has that ever been a thing? Or
yes, I think so.
It's never been talked about. I don't know. It was a Hunger Games situation.
Well, in the same way that we have Labor Day,
right?
There's this weird moment where most people don't know about the Labor Day riots in Chicago and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think it's cool to have holidays where the sort of the meaning of them has sort of morphed and changed over time, perhaps, right? So what if we did...
Can we call it something just like terribly corporate and then like rebranding day? Like, this has been last factory shut down, and like,
right,
and like maybe something terrible happened then, but like kids that are adults now don't even remember it. It was that long ago, and now it's called rebranding day.
So I think I like your idea of rebranding day, but it's on a day that was already a holiday. So they sort of like co-opted it because everyone was already celebrating on, you know, June 32nd or whatever it was, and so it was a holiday that was like an uprising of the miners when conditions were really bad, back when the place was still doing mining. And what was it called then? Let's just name it after someone, like Julian's Day or something like that. You know, like actually give it a person's name, because then it will give things for people to tie into. You know what I mean? You know what? Let's just go with like 12th Day, and that it can be X22, and maybe that was the number of one of the asteroids where it happened. And so it's just 12th Day, and it'll be on whatever day of the year it is. And then the corporation rebranded it as, you know, rebranding day or whatever, which is amazing. All right. So the next one are pretty quick. This one is number 7. How do people make money, and what is the currency like? So I think in this time period, it's sort of like digital currency.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So how do people make money?
How do you keep track of your digital currency?
I think it's fair to say, if we're in the not so distant future, this cell phone is going into my body, and there's like some sort of Bluetooth microchip dealy.
So there's a data chip that keeps track of my transactions.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's probably some kind of black market ones that you can use that aren't inside your body. But if you lose that stick, then you lose however many credits are on it or whatever as well. How do they make money? I've got like, obviously, the service industry. All the place has to be maintained, mechanics to maintain the ships that come in and go. So I think it's just a full-on tourism and maintenance industry, basically, right?
Yeah.
And shipping, because there's things that are coming and going as well from the rim. Outer Rim. So it's FedEx meets Vegas. All right, number 8 we already answered. It's what are the residents or cities like? So we've kind of talked about how the differences between the couple different areas, how things are very cramped, very sort of everyone stacked on top of each other, both physically and culturally. So there's a lot of this overlap of everything. What do people do for entertainment? So I think we can focus, we've already mentioned the upper level people what they do for entertainment. So what about the regular people that just sort of live out here? What do they do for entertainment besides just sex, drugs, and rock and roll? Is there anything else different or specific that they do?
Well, I mean, in pretty much every culture, there's some kind of fight that takes place.
Oh, right.
So whatever that, if it's an actual fight or maybe it's like a virtual reality kind of, like Street Fighter meets MMA. So there's like an actual person wearing the equipment, but it's like a digital avatar that's actually doing the battling.
Right. I feel like the avatar thing is that maybe if everyone is connected to VR, but I think it would make sense to maybe they're not physically doing it themselves. Maybe they're like working some kind of a drone, like some big heavy machinery drone, because these are all industrial workers initially. So there's all this expertise in heavy machinery and probably robotics because of the time period. So maybe there's like a giant battle bot scene or something, or maybe they're in these mech suits or whatever, and they fight it out that way. Maybe something big, over the top, and glorious, right?
That's kind of cool.
Well, then it's opulent too. You have to have a big arena for them to be able to do it in. So these machines can move around in, and that's, whoa, look how open it is in here, and all that kind of right on. All right, number 10. Are there any pets?
Again, I think like a pet. I think you could have a pet avatar, like the final evolution of the Tamagotchi. Like it's like an avatar cat or an avatar chameleon. So it's like a holographic pet.
All right, so I have avatar cats written down, and then along with that, I think the very wealthy are going to be able to support having
actual pets, living creatures,
which seems just odd and just weirdly extravagant to just bring this creature all the way with you, to just give it food and travel halfway across this, all this. All right. Number 11. What's education like? This is actually an interesting question. There's probably not any education happening in the tourist area because they're here to just have fun and have...
Right, but the people that are actually living here. And keeping things moving. Maybe
there's a little bit of that tourism of, like, this is what the mining was like, and then they go and do a little bit of digging, the panning for gold thing that you do sometimes.
Oh, that's tourism.
Tourist, right. So there's that, but they're not actually doing anything.
There's children here. Yeah. I mean, people live here, so there has to be some kind of school. So what does that look like? I'd actually already thought of this, but...
What's that?
That it was going to be a thing. That there would be children that are living here and going to school here.
Is it all digital? All VR? Because if you don't have room to have an actual schoolhouse because there's just not enough room.
But maybe you do. I mean, maybe that's part of like the housing authority that gets together. That's one of the demands of the local people that live here, and that's the elite keep them happy by giving them a designated place for their children to attend school and have like an actual area for children. I mean, that seems like a good conceit. It's definitely a good way to keep people in line. Like, okay, well, you guys want to rise up. I guess your children don't need this space anymore.
Right.
That kind of thing.
So it sort of functions as both playground and schoolhouse then.
Yeah.
Right on. Number 12. What is medicine like? Oh. Well,
it's a rough question.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess in the future, I always picture, more bionics and implants being a thing. The farther along technology evolves, like that seems to be the natural progression for things.
And with
there's already robotic surgery now, so and lasers
with
and
3D printing and all that kind of stuff.
So I would think it would be pretty good. Mm-hmm. I mean, even for people that aren't wealthy,
right? So is
fairly
it
good?
I guess, is it expensive?
I kind of feel like no, right? Because we have a surplus of laborers, but even still, like, you want to keep them around to continue to labor for you. But I don't know.
I just see some interesting potential for like street docks. The ones where you can't quite maybe it's not super expensive. But if you needed something serious, it would be a decent amount of money. So if you had to have like a leg replaced or something, that would be expensive, and that might require you to go to a street dock.
Like
so
prosthetics and cybernetics, those kinds of things would be expensive. Okay.
But regular run of the mill medicine, at this point,
I cut myself, or like a standard appendix removal. That's like nothing now.
Right.
Giving you new pieces, that can be expensive.
Right. Okay. Number 13. Were there any major historical events
Well, we talked about
that ties into our 2 holidays. I feel like
rebranding day.
And some of this, I also think that if you go too deep down the rabbit hole with this, you're giving your players too much to sort of like wrap their heads around, and you can get lost in the weeds a little bit. So I think while these things are important to think about, but it's also important to sort of like tie them together because it makes a more cohesive thing. 14, how would you describe the music? I'm going to go out on a limb and say music doesn't work unless there's air to transmit sound waves, right? I have this vision of like trance, hardcore, techno, house music because it vibrates things. So even if you're out in space and you can't hear it, you can still feel it pulsing through the station maybe. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so if you have your grab boots locked on and you're doing something, you can feel that boom, 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 boom coming through, right? Does that make sense?
That's cool. I like that.
Right on. Number 15 is, what kind of government is there?
Well, we talked about that too.
So that's right. That's corporation, right? And a lack of centralized government.
But there is like its own like self-established district government.
16, is religion a component or a concern?
I think there's always going to be a religion.
Now, since we have all of these people living on top of each other for multiple generations, is it a case where all of these earthly religions have sort of molded themselves into one sort of like hybrid thing that's an adaptation of all of them kind of combined together in the way that happens? You know, where like pagan gods were absorbed as saints?
Yeah.
Kind of a situation?
I don't think you're ever going to get like 100%.
No, but
yeah, I mean...
So that's kind of like the standard, and there's going to be your people at the extremes of whichever end.
So what are we actually worshiping? Like, are we worshiping the sun? Are we worshiping...
So let's do it where we're going to make 2. I think one is like a space daddy kind of a god, where it's in a traditional sense of things, right? There's this benevolent, you know, for lack of a better word, you know, intelligent being that has a plan in that kind of a way. And then I think it would be cool to make another religion where, in that sort of like priesthood of Mars from 40K, where they sort of worship the spirit of the technology, you know, like the signal or whatever that might be. Like there's a ghost in the machine kind of a thing that's actually guiding us as we're becoming more and more like the machine.
Okay. The sentience, let's call it that.
Right on. Because I like very much the idea of us being a caterpillar becoming the technology or whatever, right? That whole where the sex organs of the machines thing is, I think, really weird and creepy and terrifying. We should do a whole episode on that. That's, you know, I guess as a theme. So 17, we're almost done here. Home stretch. What role do the elders serve? So I think we already mentioned these aldermen, so I think those people sort of fill those roles, right? Is there anything else?
I kind of like the idea of like a Japanese culture, like in an era where your intelligence could essentially be downloaded into, you know, some kind of digital world. Like you could actually go and visit your ancestors for like advice.
Right on. So there's like a library of elders that you can go talk to digitally.
Yeah, and like the people that are still alive are like respected and valued because of that. Like,
well, and then I think there aren't many elderly here because it's a hard life. So if you make it beyond 60 or whatever it is, you're kind of a rarity probably.
I don't know. We just established like medicine was really good.
Right, but there's medicine, but then there's your just body physically wearing out.
Yeah.
So unless you can pay, you know, the fees to have your BIVAD put in and robot legs and robot lungs and whatever it is.
What do they do with their dead? Is that a question?
I
feel like this
yes,
kind of goes along
it's coming
with it.
up.
Okay,
So next is children. What role do children serve? Are they just regular children? They play and do whatever? Is there child labor? Is there...
I don't think they play and do whatever. I feel like you have to have some kind of responsibilities in a world that's structured like this. But we established there is a school and they do get free time. So there is that much at least. But I mean, I guess if you're valuing your elders, then it should be assumed that, I don't know, maybe the children spend time with the elders of the community. And then, you know, like parents and middle-aged people and teenagers are expected to go and
do all the stuff
and do all the things.
Right on. Well, then if you can download the consciousness of all your ancestors, that's probably who's doing the education, is the elderly as well. So they're the teachers and mentors. All right, number 19. Describe the underworld underbelly of society. We've already done that very clearly. And number 20, are there any heroes? My thought is to take this in more of a mythical context, in like Hercules or Sisyphus and these sort of mythical hero figures, not just, like in the way that we think of George Washington. He's like, he was an actual guy, but he's may as well be a mythical hero at this point, right? Mm-hmm. So do they have any of those, or have they all been erased by the corporation?
I think it's like religion. It's the same. Like, you have to have heroes. Mm-hmm. But I think, like, if we establish that all of your ancestors are backed up onto data, that sort of changes the way you're receiving a story. So it's no longer removed and removed and removed. So any heroes that are sort of mythical in nature would have to be old. Like before all of this. Yeah. Like, maybe even from, like, our time period. Like, old.
Or maybe those mythical heroes are people that died doing things and their consciousness couldn't be downloaded.
Oh, okay.
So
I like that.
There's people that went through things of like self-sacrifice or those moments and they died doing whatever it was. So I think all the heroes are dead. And then because they can't be downloaded and be remembered that way, then they're remembered through this oral tradition of whatever. And almost they're like more sacred maybe because they can't, like
that. So there's, like some kind of, the asteroid over here collapsed and he, held the tunnel open for this
like
many
those kind
people
of,
in his mech suit, until it collapsed and that kind of thing.
On. Yeah. So I'm just going to write down people that sacrificed and couldn't be downloaded.
So sacrifice for the greater good is going to be a common...
Well, I think there's a certain amount of, and this is something that's true in the Expanse, is that the Belters that live out here like this, they're all for the group because you can't be selfish that way in this kind of an environment. It just doesn't work. No one will survive. And they sort of just agree that we live together, we die together, and that's how it works. So it wasn't on there, and it probably ought to be. Number 21 we're going to add. What do they do with their dead? Is it like a Soylent Green thing?
I really want them to be jettisoned into space. Like a naval funeral, but for in space.
Alrighty. So that's 21. I'm not surprised that wasn't on there because how we treat our dead is a really, really big part of things. Although I guess you could tie that into elderly at the very tail end of that, So very good. So yeah, then they're gonna as the death approaches, they will download their consciousness and then jettison their physicality into space.
Do they wait for natural death to happen before that is ensued, or is it like I'm opting out sort of?
I think that at that level of science they would or at that level of medicine, that if they could probably tell when death was imminent, so then the downloading process would happen, however long that takes. And then I think there would be some sort of medicated sedation and then jettisoned to space is what I'm envisioning, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Right on. Are we good there? Is that one?
Yeah, I think I feel like I know this place.
I know, it's really weird. So just to wrap this up, is there any of these questions that we put out there that you don't necessarily think you would have considered without having us actually ask them? I've got a couple. I think that how we treat children and how they treat their elderly, like what role do they serve in society?
I see. No, I thought about children.
Right, but I
did not think about elderly.
One of those things that we just generally don't see portrayed in games is old and children, and what role do they have in society, I guess, is the bigger part of it.
Fashion. I don't generally give a lot of thought to fashion.
True.
Pets. Mm-hmm. I didn't think about that too much either. I guess, in some systems you sort of think about familiars and things like that, but like in a sci-fi setting, never considered a pet.
Do you feel like this? The one thing that I gained from this is that I feel like all of these things are kind of tied together. This is 20 questions that sort of draw themselves together into something more cohesive. Mm-hmm. And it makes you think about, there's heroes. Well, we also have these holidays we put together. So how do we build these holidays around these heroes? Because that's what we do. And those kind of things, right? I think this is really cool. I want to play in this game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we may have to develop this into something cooler and bigger. I also like the idea of something being the last of its type rolling off the line and going and being something new. I just think that's a kind of an interesting concept.
Yeah, there's a lot of like finality and then rebirth involved in the particular setting.
Right on. So I think that'll do it for this one for Titus Omega. So as you may know, we are a member of the Gonna Geek Network, so you can go over to GonnaGeekNetwork.com and find out all kinds of other geeky podcasts that involve everything from all of the super geeky shows that are out there to video games and RPGs, as well as podcasting and podcasting advice and reviews and stuff. So you can head over there and check all those podcasts out at gungeeknetwork.com. If you like what we do here at Just More Fix, you can support us at patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix and get access to all of our pre-shows and raw audio feeds, as well as our quarterly zine in PDF and print format, depending on what level you support us at. And you can go out there and join all of our awesome Patreon supporters and be awesome like them, like Alistair H., Alan White, Hector Treelane, Simon McNair, Timothy Barra, Tiziano Furlano, and the OG Todd Olson. I think that'll do it for us this week. Hopefully you guys will enjoy this Titus Omega episode, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for listening. This has been an episode of Just One More Fix. Music has been provided by Kevin MacLeod. You can find him at incompetech.com. You can support us at patreon.com/JustOneMoreFix or follow us on Twitter at Just One More Fix.